Hello and welcome to my channel, where you will hear Reddit posts you can't hear anywhere else. Lawyers of Reddit, what is the case you like to reminisce about and what happened? Story 1. The case I had a few years ago involved a small business owner named John who was being sued by his former partner, Mike, for breach of contract. Not real names of course. John and Mike had started a company together a few years earlier, but their partnership had broken down due to disagreements over the direction of the business. Mike claimed that John had violated the terms of their partnership agreement and owed him a significant amount of money. The contract between John and Mike had a number of different clauses that were open to interpretation, which made the case complicated. One of the key issues was a disagreement over the ownership of certain intellectual property rights related to the business. Mike claimed that he had developed the IP and that it belonged to him, while John argued that the IP was actually jointly owned by the partnership. Another issue was a dispute over the timing and manner of Mike's departure from the company. Mike claimed that he had resigned from the partnership and that John had agreed to buy him out for a certain amount of money. John argued that Mike had been fired due to poor performance and that he was not entitled to any additional compensation. As the trial began, both sides presented evidence to support their positions. Mike's attorney argued that John had violated the partnership agreement by using the IP without Mike's permission, and that he had failed to pay Mike the agreed-upon buyout amount. John's attorney, on the other hand, presented evidence that showed that Mike had actually been fired for poor performance and that he had not owned the disputed IP in the first place. As the trial continued, it became clear that the case was complicated and that both sides had made mistakes. However, I believed that John had the stronger case, and we worked hard to present a convincing argument to the judge. We presented a lot of evidence that showed that Mike had not fulfilled his obligations under the partnership agreement, including missed deadlines and incomplete work. We also showed that John had made several attempts to work things out with Mike, but that he had been unresponsive. As the trial wore on, the other side started to make mistakes. Mike's attorney asked leading questions and made assumptions that were not supported by the evidence, which weakened their case. At one point, the judge actually had to admonish the other attorney for being argumentative and unprofessional. Despite these setbacks, the other side continued to press their case, and they seemed to be banking on the fact that the judge would be sympathetic to their story. They argued that John had taken advantage of Mike and that he had violated the partnership agreement in several ways. However, we were able to present a strong case that showed that John had acted in good faith and that Mike had not fulfilled his obligations under the contract. In the end, the judge ruled in John's favor, dismissing Mike's claims and awarding us damages for the breach of contract. The judge agreed with our argument that Mike had not fulfilled his obligations under the partnership agreement and that John had acted in good faith. It was a great feeling to be able to help John get the outcome he deserved after all the stress and uncertainty of the trial. Story 2. I once had a case involving a woman not named Sarah who had been hit by a car while crossing the street. The driver, a man not named Tom, had been distracted by his phone and had failed to see Sarah in the crosswalk. Sarah had suffered significant injuries and had incurred substantial medical bills, and she was seeking compensation from Tom for her damages. At the beginning of the trial, Tom's attorney tried to argue that Sarah was partly to blame for the accident because she had been walking while looking down at her phone. However, we were able to present evidence that showed that Sarah had not been using her phone at the time of the accident and that Tom was solely responsible for the collision. We also presented evidence that showed that Tom had a history of distracted driving and that he had been cited for texting while driving in the past. This was a crucial piece of evidence that showed that Tom was at fault for the accident and that he had a pattern of behavior that made him a danger to other drivers and pedestrians. The other side also tried to argue that Sarah's injuries were not as severe as she claimed, and that she was exaggerating her medical expenses in order to get a larger settlement. However, we were able to present expert testimony from several medical professionals who confirmed the extent of Sarah's injuries and the cost of her medical treatment. Throughout the trial, Tom's attorney made several mistakes that worked in our favor. For example, he repeatedly asked leading questions and made assumptions that were not supported by the evidence. He also made several objections that were overruled by the judge, which made him look inexperienced and unprepared. In contrast, we presented a well-organized case that relied on strong evidence and expert testimony. We also made sure to treat Sarah with respect and compassion throughout the trial, which helped to demonstrate the seriousness of her injuries and the impact that the accident had had on her life. In the end, the judge ruled in Sarah's favor, awarding her a significant settlement that covered her medical expenses and other damages. The judge agreed with our argument that Tom was at fault for the accident and that he had a pattern of behavior that made him a danger to others on the road. It was a great feeling to be able to help Sarah get the justice she deserved after such a traumatic experience. Thanks for listening. Please like if you did like, and subscribe if you want to hear more.